Happy thing. So we were having a conversation the other day as ministry team, looking towards Lent and thinking that we'd like to really encourage people in prayer during Lent. And so Jock was mentioning that he, not he had a book, but Craig from South Australia has a book with a whole heap of prayers, which made me think I've got something like that somewhere, and it's Helping Teenagers to Pray by Mark Yaconelli, who you might have heard me mention a few times. So towards the back, he has a whole heap of different prayer ideas. And in the front, he just says some theory type stuff. So I started reading it last week because I thought, let's get my mind in set. So I guess the first question to you, wonderful intellectual people, how do you pray with young people?
How do we? I can tell you how I pray for, and that's that great book you gave me.
Awesome.
Because it tells me all about what to do and how to do it and what to say, and I just got to add the people in. Pray with the young people.
So, for instance, at brigades,
yep,
at Sunday school.
I guess from me, it's simple words as they come to me, which sometimes has some stumbles. And though I don't use the Lord's Prayer as such, I use that basic running through your head acts. So adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. Then you spend half an hour trying to explain what supplication is. But
shopping list.
Sorry, shopping list. There
it's
you
a
go.
shopping list. Yeah. What you want.
So the question was praying with them, so that's the sort of thing. If the prayers are a start of the night or an end of the night, obviously there's that very much looking forward to God being with us at the end to thank him for how we might have felt and how we went through the night. But if it's praying for things, it's trying to bring those four elements into the prayer as simple as I can. That way I understand it as well as anybody else.
Cool.
That's my start.
Wonderful start, Rod. Kylie, anything to add to that?
Pretty much the same, but I kind of trying to keep it casual and not big words, so they don't feel they've got to pray big words. And I like popcorn prayer as well, where you just say one sentence.
Yep. Cool. So yeah, I guess you probably summarized how we generally do prayer with young people. We work through the Acts type thing. We do the popcorn type prayer. We get them involved. Mark Yaconelli looks at how might we do a bit more silence type stuff. And one of the things he notes, which I think ties into what we talked about last week and that we've talked about back in the past when we did things the way Kylie likes them done, is quoting him, he says, "We minister among young people who are trained to no longer see the presence of God in the world." So that sense of, last week we were talking about the consumerism it's about me. I'm not looking for, I can't think of the word. I was trying to think of the word today, but I can't, it's not coming to me. The experiencing God being there and the bigness of God, still not coming. And Andy Root talks about that we've really lost that sense of, it's not the imminent, but it's another big word like that. And so how do we allow our young people to have those spaces where they can stop and start to experience God? And so he tells a story of a camp he took a bunch of teenagers to, and they were exploring Christian prayer. And this will probably not sound like what you would normally think of. Let's go and do this with the teenagers, but maybe this is the challenge of maybe we need to do this. So each morning, 20 to 30 school children congregated voluntarily in the seminary chapel for 20 minutes of silent prayer. You can just see them excited to get it. An hour later, we were joined by the other 70 to 80 children. So about 20 or 30 came for the early morning silent prayer, the next 70 to 80. So you've got maybe a fifth of them coming along to the early thing. Came together and the staff for a morning service that involved sung chants, intercessory prayer, reading from scriptures, and 10 minutes of silence. And mornings and afternoons were spent in plenary sessions, exploring the life of Jesus and the mystical and praying tradition of the Christian church. And each day ended with Vespers that again involved sung forms of prayer, scripture, and long periods of silence. Midway through the week, the leadership decided to see how far we could stretch the capacity of these young people for solitude and prayer. We loaded them into buses and drove them up the Northern California coast to the deserted expanse of the Bodega Dunes. Gathered within the folds of the rolling sand, amid clusters of native grasses and twisting cypress trees, we talked to the teenagers about the history of silence and solitude in the Christian tradition. We talked about the early desert abbas and ammas and the development of cloistered communities, and in particular, the many times Jesus sought communion with God in lonely and deserted places. We asked the youth to see this time of silence and solitude not as a place of emptiness, but as a time of presence, a time of fully welcoming God's love and companionship. As patches of fog from the Pacific Ocean drifted over us, we handed out journals and blankets and sent the young people out to pray. I remember walking through the dunes, carefully observing the praying teenagers. Some children sat on top of mounds of sand looking off to the horizon. Others preferred low places, clefts and crevices stacked with driftwood. Some of them lay on their backs, heads resting on their journals, watching grey shrouds of mist creep over the blue sky. Others seemed oblivious to their surroundings, their heads bowed as they scribbled intently in their journals. As the hours passed, some young people rolled themselves up in their blankets and closed their eyes, while others stood and meandered slowly towards the sea. So this prolonged time of silence, which is not what we normally think of. Whoa, we're working with young people. We fill it with noise. And he notes that at the end of the week, we asked the students to evaluate the retreat. What was the most enjoyable aspect of our time together? And despite volleyball and games nights, talent shows, karaoke, discussion groups, outings to San Francisco, and plenty of free time, the great majority responded, the afternoon praying in the dunes. And so that, yeah, I guess for me, it's that challenge of how do we allow that space for young people? And he notes then a little bit later, 8 months later, I sat eating lunch with a 17-year-old girl from Cleveland, Ohio. Lauren had participated in the prayer week the previous summer. I told her how surprised I was that so many of her fellow students had found the extended time of prayer and solitude to be the highlight of the week. She listened, nodded her head knowingly, and then said, "Do you know what it's like to be a kid nowadays? There's no downtime." She sighed, turned and looked out of the window, and then said quietly, as if she could feel the weight of her own words, "No downtime." And so he starts to talk about, prayer as being also rest and renewal, and as we stop and allow ourselves to connect with God. So what thoughts does that bring in your mind?
To me, it brings in that question, what is prayer when people are talking of it? And obviously that group and that young lady in particular were seeing it as they haven't got downtime. This is a time when I can reconnect with God, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a verbal thing,
at
least out loud. It doesn't have to duplicate anything that someone in the church, young, old, or indifferent, has told them prayer should consist of. It's for them, obviously, it was just a way of connecting.
Mm-hmm.
One of the brigades, not that many years ago now, used to a couple of times a year have a prayer something, whether it was a lunch or a prayer, invite the rest of the church. The prayer breakfasts, in fact, were the more common, but there were lunch ones as well. And one of the things there, not that we're necessarily talking about teenagers, although in those days many of them were teenagers, or just into their 20s, is didn't necessarily want to participate in prayer or know or be confident in saying things out loud. So we would have one thing was the prayer corners where they had ideas that they could be praying about. But as you said, there were times for different reasons of silence. And it was a challenge not to assume that the silence was that no one had anything to say. It was simply they might well have been thinking about the football last weekend or what's coming up, but they may also have just been wanting that peaceful time themselves to mull things over in their head, which to them was the prayer.
Yep.
And so you didn't say in your own mind, oh, it's quiet, it's been quiet for 10 seconds, let's say amen and move on. Just the wrong thing to do, because if they're in the middle of something, it's important for them to continue.
Yep.
Because it was praying for lots of things, and therefore to many people that would it would be significant to have a long period where they could just in their mind to themselves be praying.
Yeah, cool. Did anything spring into your mind, Carly?
Just that they were using the different learning styles. Like not some people get so sidetracked being asked to sit quietly and pray, and they'll just be thinking off. But if they've got some kids love writing, or teenagers, people, some like being able to walk around. I know there's at least one in your Boys Brigade group that would not be able to physically sit still, and a few in the Girls Brigade. So thinking about that for Girls Brigade, Boys Brigade camp, it's kind of like, well, I think we'd have a hard time with the younger ones. The older ones, I think, could actually really enjoy that. But not being told exactly how you've got to do it. If you want to journal, journal. If you want to walk, walk. If you want to sit, sleep, use what connects you.
Yep.
Like your 50 Ways to Bump into God book.
Yes. Yeah. And so I guess that's part of our discussion around Lent is, do we find a space where we can offer people different options and ways of praying? Because if we say, hey, we want you to get together and pray, most people have in their minds the prayer group that we've described as this is how we generally pray.
Yes.
And it's like, and for many of us, like, I'm not used to that, or I'm not comfortable with that. But if you go, hey, come together and we're going to have options of how you can pray, how does that make it different? And yes, I know my struggle each week is brigades is, how do I come up with a different prayer to the one that I prayed last week? So it's what's happened that I can tee off and so yeah, I guess so encouragement, how do we find, and as we find spaces to be quiet or allow those different forms of prayer, we're connecting in with that here to stay pillar of encounters with Jesus. That as we open up silence and that, we allow that space for the young kids in the dunes to experience Jesus in a way that they haven't experienced before.
It's interesting, Richard, you said, how do I come up with a prayer that I didn't do last week, for example? And some people might say, what does it matter? They won't remember it. But I can tell you, the guys at Brigade do and did, because there was time when this person, you could almost predict what it was going to be. And it wasn't different each week. It was quite predictable, this, that, just a routine of going through, which is no different from our Vesper, which we say at the end of the night.
Yep.
But it wasn't as encapsulating as that. And it might have even have been some of the things almost irrelevant, but the kids picked up there was no difference here. I thought it was very interesting. they probably picked it up more than I did, or quicker than I did. And I had to be told, hey, what's going on here? So that was interesting. So it is important, yes, that it's relevant. If it's going to be something shared verbally with everyone else, that it is relevant. It is different. It is not just the same thing over and over. As you said, it's very much what has happened or is happening in the week that affects everybody.
Yep. And in a sense, it's good to model the sort of Vesper at the end of here's something that you can say, and you don't need to just say it at brigades. You could say it during the week, the Lord's Prayer, all those sorts of things. It's good to have the set models, but it's also then good to show, like, I don't know, you've probably heard before, but we have our acts type thing, but our youth group leaders taught us, well, you can also have cast, or you can have stack, or you can have, so you can move those letters around, so it doesn't have to always be in that order.
Okay, yes, yeah, right, yep. I wonder what cast was, but okay, same letters, different. Yep.
Cats.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, just to try and how do you keep demonstrating to young people, keeping things alive, and that it's about what connects with you. If I need to start with this today, then I need to start, or if I need to start with confession today, I need to start with confession today and just get into do that and do that. Or maybe I'm just having a wonderful day and Thanksgiving's where I'm starting. So yeah, that freedom for young people.
Well, Lent is going to affect everybody, well, hopefully.
Yes.
And so it's really, your question is, how do we all express ourselves in prayer during that period, or opportunity of finding new ways and exploring new ways of doing it? We might find that it helps us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And as
we could do it like a speed dating type thing, but instead of dating, you're trying out a different prayer type.
Okay.
Every 5 minutes.
You could do that. There you're going to have speed dating with God. Dear God, yeah. What are you into? I like long walks on the beach, and I like. He's our lover. Why not? Though God wouldn't want a speed date; he'd want a long date.
A long date.
There's the theological thought for today.
I did have a thought of the next congregational meeting and morning tea, having 2 rows, and people just move along and pray with the person opposite them and move on to the next person as we go down.
Why not?
Could be an interesting option, because that will be during Lent, won't it?
Yes.
Should be. It's almost Easter.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's definitely during Lent. Talking about that again today too. So I'll keep reading the book and I'll come up with some other fun, exciting things.
Sounds good. Yes.
I guess it's that challenge to us, because sometimes we get stuck in the models that we learnt. So this is how I was taught, so therefore this is how I've got to teach you. Or we get stuck in the models that work for us. And so we need to be continually making sure, am I doing things in a way that connects with others that isn't necessarily me? So like Kylie's mentioned, my bumping into God book. That continued. Yes, well, that was 101.
Was it?
But there's more than 101 ideas in the book. And so it's that sense of keeping to, as a minister, I need to keep reminding myself, and I think as leaders, we need to keep reminding ourselves, I need to do some things that I think are stupid or silly because that will connect with someone here. Even though it doesn't connect with me, someone here, this is actually going to be helpful for. So how do we push ourselves out of our comfort zone and introduce new ideas that will connect with others? Even that particular child that keeps moving around at Boys Brigade. There's something for him. Yep.
Well, I'm trying to think where I was. It might well have been with Richard, but
Oh, the rod's frozen on us. Let it go, Rod. Let it go. Well, Kylie's frozen. Maybe I've
praying, but if
frozen.
you're listening, then you just need to listen. You can listen with your eyes open. You can listen.
Okay. Everyone's frozen on me, or I've gone.